My dad has always favored my brother over me since we were in middle school. Over time, I got used to it, but I was never the kind of son that my dad wanted because, unlike him, I had no interest in sports or doing the typical macho things that boys do. Later on, I get my sweet revenge. Dad crushes my dreams to protect Golden Child and refuses to pay for my tuition fee. Being a huge mama's boy, I was always more into traditionally feminine things growing up. I loved everything to do with the kitchen, reading books, and even singing. My dad tried to make me play football with him, but I was never very good at it, so we grew apart over time. My brother, on the other hand, was exactly the kind of son that my dad wanted. He was a rough and tough boy who wasn't afraid to get hurt or even dirty while playing. He was the perfect son for my dad, and it was very evident that he loved my brother far more than he loved me. My mother was fair to both of us and never showed partiality, which is why I loved her even more. I tried to spend time and make friends with my dad, but after we grew apart, he didn't seem to be interested in mending our relationship either. Sadly, the glue that held our dysfunctional family together, my mother, died when I was in the 8th grade. She had cancer, and by the time we found out, it was too late to save her. My dad and brother were no help in dealing with my feelings. They suppressed any emotional reaction they'd had to my mother's passing, and if anything, grew even more distant from me. In a normal family, something like this would have brought us closer. My mother was a great cook, and she'd often tell me that had she not been forced into taking over her dad's business, she probably would have become a chef. So cooking was the only thing that brought me any comfort after my mother's passing. I kind of spiraled during that time. My father was irritated by my obsession with cooking, and he would constantly nag me to get out of the damn kitchen and do something manly. One day, he even threatened to make me do all the other household chores if he saw me in the kitchen again. I told him to man up and be more like my brother, and we got into a heated argument where I told him he never loved me. It was finally out in the open, and I suppose that was the last time I spoke to my father in such a manner. After that, I quit attempting to win his approval completely, and he seemed unconcerned. For the next few years, I devoted all of my free time to studying new recipes and listening to music in my room. I was determined to make this chef thing work, not just for myself, but also for my mother. In the meantime, my brother and I had little in common and only spoke when absolutely necessary. So after my mom passed away, I really had no one to turn to. Eventually, when it came time for me to apply to colleges, I made the decision to apply to both regular colleges and a few of the best culinary schools in order to at least give myself a chance. I wasn't sure if my dad would approve, but I had to try. I was thrilled that this was finally happening for me, but I was equally nervous since this would mean having to ask my dad for permission. I'd already made up my mind to beg him to let me go if he seemed to be reluctant, because I just absolutely had to make this happen for myself. At the very least, I'd already interned at a restaurant secretly that summer and had some experience. I had managed to make them write a recommendation letter for me, and since that helped greatly, I did end up getting accepted into several of the schools that I'd applied to, including one of the best, which just so happened to be in France. I did eventually tell my father about it, and while I was prepared for him to reject my request, stating that it wasn't a manly profession, I was completely unprepared for him to decline paying my tuition. I still remember being quite taken aback when he informed me that he would not be covering my education at all, since it wasn't as though my dad was impoverished. In fact, he was fairly well off and could easily afford to send me to France. However, the reason my dad wasn't ready to pay for my tuition wasn't money. Rather, it was the knowledge that if I went to France and joined such a reputable school, it would make my younger brother feel insecure. As it is, he was having trouble with his grades and couldn't bring himself to focus. I could not have imagined any other father in the world crushing their child's dreams like this for their favorite, so I was shocked that he would do something so cruel to his own son and did not know how to respond to him. I tried to tell him that I needed this, but he was unyielding and would not pay for my tuition. He even told me that his top priority was my brother's well-being and that he did not want me to compete with him. The only reasons I hadn't moved out sooner were that I felt comfort in the house where I'd grown up with my mom, and that I didn't want to change schools, which I'd have to do if I moved in with my aunt. since she lived pretty far away from the high school I went to. I told her all about my dad and how he'd outright refused to pay my tuition and that I needed her help. After a lot of pleading and crying, when he still wouldn't budge, I ended up having a huge fight with him in which I said a lot of things to him and then left his house permanently. Because she wasn't as wealthy as my dad, it felt ridiculous to ask her for so much money. But she assured me that she would cover every cost. Somehow, she raised the money and sent me to the culinary school of my dreams, for which I will always be grateful. Once there, I worked part-time as well and tried to make the most of my time there to make all the money that was being spent on me worthwhile. I worked incredibly hard, and when I graduated, I was among the most skilled chefs there and even got a job within a few months of graduating. I worked for a few years in a really upscale French restaurant, sending half of my pay to my aunt to pay off whatever debt I had. Fortunately, I didn't have to rely on student loans, or else I might never have been able to pay it off. Anyway, after a few years, I moved back home once I had saved up enough money to open my own restaurant. In the interim, I worked as the head chef at another restaurant here and continued to work toward my dream of opening my own restaurant someday. Finalized a few weeks ago, I was able to open the restaurant I had been dreaming of for a long time. My mother's name was chosen, a really fortunate coincidence for us, as my mother actually has a really beautiful and uncommon name in the city we called home. Two of my friends from back when I was in France also joined in on my business idea and are co-owners with me. I was grateful when they allowed me to choose what we were going to name the restaurant. They also happened to be from the same state, so we were all cool with opening our restaurant in my preferred city. We even threw a little party a few days prior to our official opening for business, for a select group of people, of course, including my aunt and a few of her friends who had also contributed to my tuition. I also invited some of my school friends back. But that was pretty much it. I didn't invite my father and brother for obvious reasons. I hadn't spoken to them since I'd left home, and they hadn't bothered to ever get back in touch with me. I suppose it was better that way for all of us, but I should have known that they would undoubtedly show up to ride my success one day. And that's precisely what happened at the party we threw. They arrived an hour before the party was scheduled to start, but security didn't stop them because we shared the same last name, and they said they were here to surprise me. Well, at least that part was true. I was definitely taken aback when I saw them. My dad and brother greeted me as if nothing terrible had ever happened before, and they were really friendly toward me, probably for the first time in my life. So I just froze when they first entered the restaurant. My friends sensed something wasn't quite right, so they left us alone after politely introducing themselves to me. I'm grateful that they were able to sense my unease. When they dropped another bomb on me, showing me a gift they brought me, I still hadn't recovered from the shock of seeing them again. It was a portrait of my mother, and my dad even told me that he commissioned it for me to hang up in my restaurant as soon as he'd heard that a fancy restaurant with this name was opening up in our city, knowing full well that it was definitely none other than his son, and even telling me that he'd always known that I had it in me. My brother was also jumping on the bandwagon, praising me, saying he was incredibly proud of me. I couldn't believe my ears, and I knew right away that there was something very strange going on here. I let them talk for a while, knowing that there had to be a reason they were here. And finally they did, explaining that my brother was now employed as a bartender, and that even that was only made possible by the fact that my dad had persuaded a friend to hire him for a job at his club, that my brother's grades had consistently declined throughout high school and college, which was the reason he didn't wind up in the high-paying positions my dad had always expected of him. Additionally, he had been slacking during high school football games, which prevented him from receiving a sports scholarship, and ironically, that he was the one who had to attend community college after being turned down by everyone else. My brother had done nothing at all to deserve a more respectable position, so what they wanted me to do was make him a partner in the company. I wanted to laugh in their faces, but I restrained myself and told them I'd give it some thought. I wasn't going to consider it though. I just didn't want to turn them away. I wanted them to stay for the celebration because I had a much better plan in mind to humiliate my family, who would emerge from the shadows as soon as they heard about my success. I spent the evening socializing with my dad and brother, and I even overheard them brag about me to a few people. which amazed me at their audacity. Towards the end of the party, it was time for the hosts, which meant me and my partners, to make a toast. My friends went first because I wanted to save the best for last. They seemed reasonably pleased. But boy oh boy, they had no idea what was about to come. After a while, our guests started arriving, and in an hour or so, everyone we'd invited was there. When it was finally my turn to speak, I decided that that day I would finally speak from the bottom of my heart. I began by saying thank you to all of my guests and raised a glass to my mother, who I felt was the reason I'd ever been able to accomplish so much. I firmly believed that her belief in me as a child had kept me believing I could accomplish anything at all, even after she passed away. After I paid my respects, I decided to address the disrespect as well. I explained to them that I had to borrow money from my aunt and her friends in order to attend culinary school, and I also thanked them. Eventually, I addressed the reason I had to borrow money for my tuition in the first place. My family. I explained that I had grown up with a father who never showed me love or faith in me, and he constantly chastised me for having feminine interests like cooking. I also told them that my dad had refused to pay for my tuition because he was afraid that I would succeed more than his golden child, which is why I had to leave home. Nevertheless, I managed to overcome all obstacles and turn myself into the person I am today. So they did deserve some of the credit for creating all the hardships I've had to endure. While I was saying all of this, a lot of people gave my dad and brother the worst looks they could manage, and even they had the grace to look ashamed, even though I knew they didn't feel that way at all. Anyway, I walked over to them and actually hugged them, maintaining the same facade that they had when they came to see me today. Two people could play this game. I said that since they had come to celebrate my success today, I would forgive them for whatever had happened in the past, and I was even prepared to offer my brother the position of bartender at my restaurant. Only my family, and I knew that this was nothing more than an attempt to humiliate them, which I'd done quite successfully. But they had to smile and act like they were super grateful for what I'd done since they couldn't exactly storm out angrily, which is exactly what they wanted to do. Outsiders saw this clearly as a really emotional reconciliation, and they even ended up clapping for me at the end of my speech, and there were a few wolf whistles. When eventually the crowd dispersed, and it was time for us to head home, my brother and father confronted me outside my restaurant. They were very angry, and I swear, my brother had tears in his eyes. They demanded an explanation for what I had done. And if I hadn't meant to make my brother a partner, then I should have just turned them away as soon as they arrived. I just laughed and told them that this was my way of giving them back for everything that they had done to me over the years, and that this was exactly what they deserved. After that, I walked away and didn't bother to look back, even though I heard my brother sobbing about how cruel this was, and he even yelled after me to tell me that I would regret this. Still, I didn't care because I was already in my car and driving home. My aunt believes that I went too far with this one and should have just booted them out right away. But I don't agree with her. This was well-earned retaliation for embarrassing my father and brother, and that was a few days ago, and I haven't heard from them since. First update. Hey, I decided not to reach out to my family to apologize in spite of what my aunt had said about me being way too harsh. I don't feel sorry about what I did, so I'm not going to pretend I do and go out of my way to say so. They could have taken the opportunity to apologize to me when they visited me, but they didn't do so. I explained this to my aunt as well, and while she still believes I shouldn't have done what I did, she hasn't said much about it. I guess this is just one of those areas where we agree to disagree, and I'm okay with that. In other news, my brother has made sure that he goes behind my back to talk crap about me to all our friends back from school. It's unfortunate that we went to the same high school, since this just means that random strangers from school are now texting to confirm the rumors that I'd humiliated and then kicked out my dad and brother from my restaurant after feeding them 3-day-old food on purpose. Yeah, he exaggerated the story to make himself seem like the victim, which is pretty unsurprising. Ordinarily, I wouldn't care about petty rumors, but I don't want potential customers taking these rumors seriously. So I've texted my brother that if he doesn't stop spreading lies about me in my restaurant, then I'll make sure that he loses the job that he has right now. I'm hoping that it works because I really don't feel like dealing with that unnecessary crap right now. I'm really busy with work, and this just isn't the time. Second update. I'm pretty sure this is my dad's tactic to ensure his darling son lands a high-profile job without doing any real work. But unfortunately, it's not going to work with me. I've told him that if he doesn't stop, then he'll be hearing from my lawyers, and that he's in absolutely no position to be negotiating with me right now. The only reason I haven't done anything yet is that I don't want to get caught up in needless drama. But I'll definitely mess him up if he tries anything funny after this. Third update. So guys, it's been around a month since the last update, and since I've been really busy, I haven't been able to fill you guys in on what happened after that. My brother did stop talking crap about me behind my back, but they were still pretty desperate to join in on my success. So my dad decided to pay me a visit with my brother a few weeks ago just to intimidate me. They showed up at my house threatening to sue me for using my mother's name for my restaurant, and even told me that they'd already spoken to a lawyer. So if I didn't want any trouble, I needed to make my brother a partner as soon as possible. Obviously, I called their bluff immediately since no lawyer would take up such a stupid case. I think they were forgetting a very important fact, that she was my mother too and not just his wife. As far as I was concerned, no law could stop me from using her name. By then, I'd had enough of their bull crap, so I told them that if they didn't leave me alone, then they'd be forcing my hand, and I'd have no option but to call the cops. My brother lost his temper at that point and tried to grab me by the collar, but luckily my dad held him back. I think it was the constant humiliation that had finally gotten to him, and he'd snapped. Well, it wasn't my fault, and they were lucky that I didn't call the cops right then. I told my dad that he needed to get the hell out, but he only told my brother to go cool off in the car and that he wanted to speak to me in private. After my brother left, he tried to manipulate me by telling me that if my mother knew what I was doing to them, then she'd be really upset with me, and I should bury the hatchet. At this point, I told him to leave me the hell alone, because even I was at my limit. He couldn't just use my mother to get his way. That was just low. To be honest, we were way past the point of reconciliation. Not once had either of them apologized to me even once. So I really didn't understand why they expected me to forgive them without even asking for it. As for what my mother would feel, I'm sure she would have felt equally let down back when my father had refused to pay for my tuition, and for that matter, every freaking time he made me feel awful about myself. So he should be the last person to give me a sermon about what my mother would and wouldn't like. I know she's proud of me wherever she is, and nothing that my dad says is going to change that. Anyway, they finally left, and I haven't heard from them since. I did contact my lawyer though to discuss any potential legal ramifications, and he confirmed what I already knew, that they were just trying to intimidate me. I'm sure they'll come up with some other tactics soon, but I'll be ready for them, and I'm not backing down on this. Fourth update. Hey, guys! It's been a while since my last update, and quite a bit has happened since then. So after that little visit, I decided to take some preemptive measures. I consulted my lawyer, as I mentioned in my last update, and he advised me to document everything just in case they decided to escalate things further. So I did just that. I kept a record of any interaction or attempted contact they made with me, including dates, times, and details of what happened. Thankfully, for a while, there was nothing. It seemed like they were finally going to give up and leave me alone. I knew it was too good to be true. Fast forward to a few days ago, and I got served with a notice of a lawsuit from my dad and brother. They were claiming that I was using my mother's name for the restaurant without their permission, and it was causing them emotional distress. I couldn't help but roll my eyes when I read the notice. It was such a blatant attempt to harass and intimidate me. I immediately contacted my lawyer, and we're preparing to fight this ridiculous lawsuit. I'm not going to let them bully me into submission, and I'm ready to face them in court. I'll keep you guys updated on how things progress, but I appreciate all the support and advice you've given me so far. Fifth update. Good morning, everyone. As you can see, the legal battle has officially started. I've hired a lawyer who specializes in defamation and harassment cases, and we filed a counterclaim against my dad and brother. We're arguing that their lawsuit is baseless and that it's a clear attempt to harass and intimidate me. My lawyer is confident that we have a strong case, especially considering the evidence we've gathered documenting their past behavior. We're also looking into the possibility of a restraining order to prevent any further harassment. The court date has been set, and I'm mentally preparing for the upcoming battle. I appreciate all of the messages of support and encouragement. Although dealing with this has been difficult, knowing that I have people rooting for me helps a lot. Sixth update. Hello everyone. I wanted to update you on the latest developments. Basically, my lawyer and I were ready for a legal battle, but it appears that my dad and brother decided to back down. My lawyer believes that they may have realized their position was precarious and chose not to face an embarrassing legal loss. Although this is a relief in terms of legal proceedings, I won't stop watching, and if they continue to cause trouble, we're prepared to take further legal action. I appreciate the community's support and encouragement during this difficult journey, and I'm grateful for the community's encouragement. Last news. Hello everyone. Just to give you a final update on the situation, my brother and dad have distanced themselves from me, and there haven't been any additional legal or personal issues since my last update. It appears that dropping the lawsuit was a wise move on their part, given the lack of evidence to support their claims. I've let their actions take my attention away from running my restaurant, and I'm grateful for the support and guidance from this community, and I appreciate every message and word of encouragement. Although there will always be some residual tension, I'm thankful to have cleared the major obstacles, and I'm now able to move forward with my life and business. Thank you all for being a part of this journey.